Good evening, everybody. My name is Jake Weiland. Welcome to the Safety and Security Community Conversation. Certainly, everybody here from the district and our community members are here because we share concerns. Safety and security is certainly a top priority for us. In an effort to support these ongoing efforts, being transparent and inclusive of our community stakeholders, we're excited to be here this evening for another community conversation. We have an ongoing, strong and positive relationship with the Mount Lebanon Police Department. Our administration works closely with them, and officers are always highly responsive and knowledgeable to us as we need them. Additionally, we are fortunate to have Officer Henley in the high school as our school resource officer. He, along with Chief Aloth and their department, are a valuable asset to our district, and we're delighted to host this event with them this evening. For those that are unable to join us in person, this event is being recorded and will be available on our website. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank both Dr. Steinhauer and Chief Aloth for their participation in this collaborative conversation, and I'll now turn the event over to them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We are happy to have you here. This is actually our third community conversation that we've had. 2 years ago, following an incident at Parkland High School in Florida, it was a very important, critical issue that we needed to discuss with our community. And Chief Aloth and I met with the community at that time, and then we followed up in the fall with that same conversation. And we think it's a good idea for us to reconnect and talk about some of the things that we're doing. Even though it may not be a critical topic today, it's always critically important for us to pay attention to it. So I'm Tim Steinhauer. I'm the superintendent of schools here. A little bit about myself. Been in education now for 35 years, 13 years here as a superintendent, and I've filled every role in the school district that's possible. A teacher, an assistant principal, a middle school principal, a high school principal, assistant superintendent, and then finally these last 13 years as superintendent here. I'm a resident of the community. Both my boys graduated from Mount Lebanon High School. We still live in the community, and one of the research suggests that people move to communities for two primary reasons. First of all, it's the schools, and we like to think that from an academic and social-emotional standpoint, we're providing a high-quality education. And then secondly is safety. That's why people move to communities, because they feel it's safe. So the Mount Lebanon community has a really strong reputation as far as providing a good education and school safety and community safety. So we think that's because of the police department and because of the school district. And Chief, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Steinhauer. Mr. Weiland, thank you for having me again. My name is Aloth. I'm the Chief of Police here in Mount Lebanon. I've been with the department for going on 23 years now. I've been the chief for the last 6. Born and raised in the South Hills. Went away to college. Came back here after a short stint in Ocean City, Maryland, as a seasonal police officer down there, and I've been with Mount Lebanon ever since. I live in the community as well, live over in Sunset Hills. I have 2 daughters, one in 7th grade at Mellon and one in 4th grade at Howe. So thanks again for having me. Happy to be here.
We will probably keep this a little conversational, but then we have about 15 minutes of information, 15-20 minutes of information we want to present to you. And then Aaron and I will sit up here and answer as many questions as you have for us. We think it should last about an hour, but we're happy to stay longer than that. So tonight, we're going to talk about prevention and response. And I have 4 more slides for you, one about community partnership, layered approach to school safety, cybersecurity, and the impact of social media. So those are going to be our main talking points tonight. But we base our work on prevention, making sure that things don't happen, and then we also train for how to respond appropriately when something does happen. So let's move right along. Our first priority in our community is these partnerships that we have with people. And tonight we have Chief Aloth with us. We also have our municipal manager, and we have several of our school administrators with us. But we couldn't do our work unless we had established relationships with people. The Mount Lebanon Police Department has trained with us. As Aaron indicated, many of them live in our community. They have children here, so we work very closely with the police department. We actually have some official agreements. That we have a memorandum of understanding in which we share communication back and forth regarding critical incidents that occur. Aaron, I don't know if you want to say anything more about the...
Yeah, the partnerships are absolutely critical, and it's not only the police department, but all of our public safety agencies, the fire department, medical rescue team south. We work with the various county agencies to ensure that we're all talking to one another ahead of time, training together, developing these partnerships, making sure we understand how to respond, making sure we understand who's responding, and making sure that we're working together before these situations happen. So it's not the first time that we've had the opportunity to work together and collaborate on things. So yeah, the partnerships are absolutely critical.
And one of the really nice things about Mount Lebanon is our community and school district are coterminous, meaning the school district is the boundaries of the community. So we are closely connected with all the services that are provided in the district. We also have some relationships that we've developed over the years with our faith leaders. Once a year we get together with our faith leaders from various churches, synagogues, different religious groups, and we talk about what we have in common. And what we have in common are the kids. And we talk about the issues and challenges that we're all facing together. And it becomes really important to us when we have incidents that occur in our schools that touch on the religious nature. And we can rely on those partnerships and those relationships that we build to help us navigate those. So they become really good partners with us. Another group that we rely on very closely is our PTA. Bonnie Doherty is here tonight. She's our PTA Council President. And the district enjoys a really strong base of volunteers, and that's through our PTA. So those relationships where they provide us information and feedback and ask us important questions. I also have a group of key communicators that we meet 3 times a year, and that's just a group of individuals from the community. They could have kids in the schools, they might be retired. We try to get a nice cross-section of our residents, and we talk to them about issues that are coming up in our schools. And we have a relationship with the Allegheny Children's Institute, and they run our student assistance programs, and we'll be talking about that a little bit more as we move on here. So in safety and security, the chief has always talked to us about it's not just one thing that's important. It's that layered approach. It's building relationships with people. It's the infrastructure that we have. It's the training that our children, staff, and administrators go through. It's the personnel that we have in the district, and it's our ability to communicate effectively. So it's that layered approach that we think is critical. Building relationships. We start from a foundation that our ability to talk with kids and build positive relationships with them leads us to having critical conversations as issues come up. And so we work really hard to gauge and engage our children. So we do a school climate survey at the secondary level. At every level, we have some type of program where we try to engage the kids beyond just the classroom. At the middle schools, we have team time, and at our elementary schools, we have individual lessons that our school counselors teach to our children about remaining safe. We have 2 other relationships that we develop, and that's our community outreach unit, and I'll let Aaron talk about that, and our school resource officer. So why don't you just cover both those?
Yeah, we're very fortunate here in Mount Lebanon with the police department to be able to dedicate some resources specifically to community outreach. These are officers that do nothing but that. They're not responsible to answer 911 calls. They're not out there, on a daily basis patrolling. They specifically do all of our outreach activities. During the school year, that includes about over 650 lessons to the kids from at all levels, from kindergarten all the way through high school. And they talk about a lot of things related to decision making, related to consequences, related to safety, obviously, social media safety, internet safety. They talk about things that we obviously see on a daily basis when we're out there, working in the community, things that we notice that cause people to make bad decisions. And we try to explain the situations to the kids through various grade level appropriate classes so they have a good understanding of what it is that they need to be aware of and avoid. So those lessons are very valuable. It helps us build relationships with the kids as they're getting older. They understand that there's officers out there that work in our community, what those officers are doing, and ultimately it gives them a good familiarization with how we operate. And then the school resource officer, that's been in place now for the school year, I believe. So the fourth year we've had that in place. Ultimately, that is an officer who is specifically assigned here at the high school. It's a Mount Lebanon police officer, Officer Henley. Officer Henley is available as a resource to the high school. He gets involved in, obviously keeping the school safe, but then again, building relationships with the kids. He's not here for disciplinary matters. He's not here to enforce the student code. He's here to assist and be a police officer in the school to provide that level of safety and security. And ultimately, that program, the school resource officer program, has received nothing but positive accolades from everybody involved, whether it's the staff, whether it's the students. Ultimately, it's been a great resource, and I'm very happy that we picked a good officer for that. We weren't looking to assign somebody here that didn't want to be here. Officer Henley absolutely wanted to be here. We interviewed officers to make sure that we had the correct officer here for that job. So it's not somebody that's just stuck here and looking to not cause trouble. He actually wants to be here. He's seen as a very positive role model for a lot of the kids in the school. And ultimately, that was our goal with that program, was to build those relationships.
And Officer Henley gets into some of our classrooms and does some teaching himself about law, and I know he's an excellent resource for our faculty and staff. So there's
I'm sorry to interrupt, he even helps coach the middle school football
yes,
team.
right, he's
So,
coach our middle school football team.
he's very involved.
Yes. So relationships are important to us, and let's talk for a minute about infrastructure. So Aaron, could you describe about 2018, we engaged the police department in doing a school safety audit for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this concept of layered approach, and it's interesting. I've heard it come out more and more, especially with some of the response to COVID. The layered approach, the layered mitigation approach. Well, we've been talking about layered approach as far as school safety for years now. And I think it's important, and I think that if you make the comparison to how some of the response has been to COVID-19, we talk about all these different levels of mitigation, whether it's testing, whether it's vaccines, whether it's masks. All these things together are hopefully going to keep us safe. And this is the same idea. We have multiple levels of safety and security within the schools that are described on the slide, but ultimately all of those working together are what's going to keep us most safe. So the infrastructure items, we have an officer on our staff, through actually one of our community outreach officers, who has specific training in physical security surveys. He spent a significant amount of time getting certified to be able to go into public buildings and provide security surveys of those buildings. So ultimately, he can give lists of recommendations on what can be done to the building to better secure it. Because ultimately, infrastructure, again, it's just one of those layers, but it's an important layer. We don't want people in our buildings that really don't belong there. And he's taken this beyond the schools, obviously. We go to churches and provide these surveys. We've done some work with the hospital, a lot of businesses throughout town. So a lot of public places, we've had the opportunity to get in and work with the property managers, the owners, the different people that run the buildings to make sure that they're doing everything that they can ultimately to provide the best level of security to the buildings. And
So-
we made several recommendations. We had a list of recommendations. We helped prioritize those recommendations. Ultimately, a lot of things were put into place that we initially recommended. So we went back and looked at those recommendations again in 2019, 18, 19. And ultimately, we reprioritized some of those items. And the school board did provide some additional funding to put some additional measures in place at that time.
Yeah, so at that time, the school board put aside $1 million just for physical infrastructure improvements regarding safety and security. So that's things like, if you see outside some of our schools, those bollards that are there to prevent traffic from coming in. We put in cameras throughout the district, both externally and internally. We put the Raptor System in, which is a visitor management system. So as you come into our buildings, if you're a visitor, we take your driver's license and we do a quick background check on that before we let you into our building. We put in captured vestibules. So that's a concept that gained a lot of traction, I don't know, 10 years ago, and slowly the school district, as they renovated their facilities, began putting in these captured vestibules where you can't come directly into the building, you come into a vestibule, and then you have to state your purpose, and that's the whole process to get in. The last school I think we did was Jefferson Middle School, and just because of the layout of that school, that took a little bit more time to do, but we have those captured vestibules everywhere. We completed an emergency operations plan last summer, so that needs to be updated every several years, and that is a document which actually one of the members from the fire department helped us complete, and that has probably every scenario and some strategies to deal with every scenario. So out of that, we have a critical incident plan, and from that, every teacher, every administrator has a quick reference chart. So in the event of a bomb threat, sometimes you can't always think of what do I need to do. There's a checklist that you can go through. In the event there's somebody outside your building, there's a checklist for strangers outside your building. So both those are instrumental in helping us think through what we do and when we do it. The next item on there is training. The district has spent a significant amount of time training, and we're going to talk just a little bit about Alice in a minute, but before we do that, I want to talk about some of the other training that our staff and students have gone through. It's the mental health first aid that we instructed all of our staff on last year. Again, we gave them our critical incident plan, and our administrators work with their school staff to go through those and prepare for those. We had some training in trauma-informed care, so we're able to deal with the mental health side of this also. And with our students and staff, we've spent a lot of time with Alice. And Aaron, I'll let you describe what Alice is.
Yeah, Alice is a program that we've been involved in for several years now with the district. It's essentially run, hide, fight, but it's what it does is it allows a option for schools. Because in a setting like a school, one of the most critical pieces of information that you have is the ability to provide information. So we have PA systems, we have teachers with walkie-talkies, we have cell phone communications within the building. So ultimately, you see the top of the chart there, is the alert. It's important to be able to provide information. So this is what we practice on, this is what we train on. This is empowering every staff member, regardless of what level they're at, teacher, custodian, building administrator, whoever it is. It empowers everybody in the building to be able to get onto a system and provide information to as many people in the school as they possibly can in the event of an intruder into the building. So that's a critical piece of Alice, is that ability to alert. The next steps in Alice ultimately are all options. And this is where we have the teachers think for themselves. We train them to think for themselves, as well as the kids. You know, obviously at the elementary school levels, this is much more on the teachers. As the kids get a little bit older in middle school and especially into high school, we train the students as well, because they will find themselves in situations where they don't have an adult around to guide them. But we're looking to provide them options because it's not a one-size-fits-all type response. Depending on where the intruder is, where the threat is, your best option may be to evacuate the building, or your best option may be to lock down and barricade yourself in that certain position. Ultimately, we know the counter, that's the last resort, but at least there's an option in those situations. And then we talk about the inform, that just strengthens the alert. It's just about providing additional information throughout the incident as it occurs. So we think it's very critical to provide options and make sure that everybody understands those options, because ultimately when something bad happens, you don't want that to be the first time you've ever thought about it. And that's why we ask our students and our staff to train on these. Ultimately, they are required, I believe, twice a year to perform drills related to this type of response. So usually those are just walkthroughs. They're a little bit more casual, you know. They're not, you know, throwing a whole bunch of extra stress at the kids, but ultimately they are just conversations. You know, the building administrator might get on the PA system and announce that there's a intruder near the main office. And then that gives the teachers the opportunity to talk with their students. All right, so if we hear on the PA that there's a intruder near the main office, what will we do? What's our best option for where we currently are in the building? You know, so it does give them that opportunity to talk about it in an environment that doesn't cause those additional levels of stress or things along those lines. We do practice some drills with our teachers. You know, they have been introduced to a little bit more stress when it comes to these drills. And ultimately, we're just looking to provide them with that feeling of what it might be like in one of those types of situations. So hopefully they know how to better respond if they ever do find themselves in that type of situation. We know that it's not always pleasant type of training, especially when we do offer that type of stress, but we think it's important. We think it's important in that layered approach, because ultimately if it does happen, like I said, we want people to have thought about it, you know, before it does actually happen, in the event that it would.
And as we, this year as we brought all of our students back at the same time, we've had to spend a lot of time on Alice, thinking about it, talking to the kids about it, and helping to empower them. You know, Aaron knows that, you know, early in my career as a teacher, the training for us was to lock your door, get in the back corner of the room, and be quiet. That was our training at the time. That was the best thinking at the time. But subsequently, we've learned that the best thinking is now, if you have the opportunity to get out of the building, you should be doing that. If you have the opportunity to counter, you should be doing that. So I like the whole idea of it empowers people to make good decisions about their safety and security. So our police brought that to us. We've trained in it quite significantly, and we continue to train with our students about that. But we're an educational institution, and we have to constantly spend time talking about it over and over and over. Our children have been exposed to this for at least 13 years now, but we have to keep going it over and over again.
And I think it's also, if you don't mind me adding, I think it's also important for parents in the community to understand some of the terminology related to that if you're not clear. We don't call them lockdown drills anymore, because just like Dr. Steinhauer said, lockdown is only one option, right? We have other options. Evacuate might be your best option, right? So we don't want people specifically thinking that their response is just to lock down. It's usually best if there's danger within the building, if you can, get out of the building, right? So we don't call them lockdown drills, we call them Alice drills. And I think another thing I always like to point out when we talk about Alice is the difference between an internal threat to our building and an external threat to our building. There are two different types of responses. We initiate the Alice procedures if it's an internal threat. The intruder is within the building or within the facility. If it's something going on in the community, like a bank robbery at the bank down the road, that is an external threat to the building. As far as we know, the threat did not come into the school building. So all that we ask the school to do in those situations is called shelter in place. So if you ever hear the terminology shelter in place, all that we're asking is that all the doors to the building, they should already be locked, but let's double check and make sure that everything is secure, and it can be business as usual within the building. Kids can still be learning, we can still switch classes, All of that stuff, just everybody stays in the building. Nobody leaves the building, nobody comes into the building until that shelter in place is cleared. If we develop new information to believe that the threat is getting close to the school, then obviously that changes. But if it's an external threat to the building, sometimes just to eliminate the possibility that there's any danger to the students or staff in the building, we will ask them to shelter in place until that incident is resolved.
So let's move on to another of our layers, and we've been talking about it a little bit already, about the personnel we have in our buildings. We have our school resource officer who is based here at the high school, but I do need to tell you that he does assist the entire district with consulting. Principals will call and ask about certain issues, but he acts as our immediate liaison between the school district and the police department.
And a couple pieces of technology, sorry to interrupt, but a couple pieces of technology that are actually critical to his job is anytime 911 is called from any phone within the school district, within a school district building, he gets alerted as soon as that 911 call is made. So while the call taker down at the county dispatch center is receiving that call, our school resource officer is already getting alerted that there's a 911 call and what school that call was placed from. So he can immediately start to have our officers head that direction while the details are coming in. So that's a very critical thing. The other thing is he also has access, Dr. Steinhauer mentioned in the infrastructure discussion about cameras. He has access to every camera in the building within his office here at the high school. Every camera, I should say, in all the school buildings within his office here. He has a huge monitor up on the wall. He's very good at operating it. Within seconds of an incident happening, he can pull up the cameras related to that particular call and provide that feedback to the officers that are responding to the actual scene. So it's definitely some pieces of infrastructure that are included or along with that particular person that provides us additional capabilities through his position.
And Aaron did talk about the community outreach unit that comes in and teaches lessons K through 12. So those two officers are in our buildings probably every day.
Yes.
And we also asked Aaron a few years ago if the police officers, when they're on duty, if they have time to walk through our buildings. So we often have police officers coming into all of our buildings and just walking through the building. I think that's important to keep their visibility with us. We haven't talked much about our school counselors, but the board invested a significant amount of resources in making sure that all of our buildings had school counselors to assist us with the mental health and well-being component of school safety. So they work hard to develop those relationships, help guide kids, help respond when kids give them information. So our school guidance counselors, our school psychologists who work with our students, and obviously all of our principals who work with them. Our teachers are the frontline people who are with our kids and they develop relationships with them. We rely on our teachers to be our eyes and ears, and they are required to report certain things, and they're very helpful in helping us address issues as they come up. So personnel is a critical layer in that multi-layered approach. And the last one, and we've been alluding to it all night, is communication. I've been in a lot of different school districts, and the superintendent typically doesn't have the police chief's cell phone in his phone, and I gotta tell you, just the communication that we have with the chief, the deputy chiefs, the police officers, it's instantaneous. We text, we call, they're connected into our communications, so we think that has been helpful. We also have a program called Safe to Say, which was started by the Pennsylvania District Attorney, and he started that 3 or 4 years ago, and that's an anonymous tip line that comes into the district. We train all of our students 5 through 12 on how to access it and how to use it, the appropriate ways to use it. And we get those Safe to Say alerts, and sometimes they're not important. Maybe I saw a kid vaping in a bathroom, but sometimes they're life safety issues, such as A friend of mine has some suicidal ideations, and we get those alerts 24 hours a day, and our SRO gets those alerts. Our principal gets them, Dr. Urban, Dr. Davis get them, our communication director gets them. So there are many, many people on those to look at those safe to say reports as they come in so that we can make good decisions about what's being reported to us. Since the beginning of the school year, we've had 64 reports through that safe to say program. 30 of them were about the same issue. A few weeks ago, we had an incident that triggered many, many people and parents to alert us about one specific incident. So let's say we've had maybe 30 reports, distinct reports. Anything more about communication?
No, I think you covered it. Yeah, I agree. It's absolutely critical. It goes back to those relationships. We make sure that we're all talking before we have incidents or issues to make sure that we know how to get a hold of each other. And I think developing those relationships between the school and the public safety agencies is extremely important.
Yeah, you never want the first time you call somebody to be the first time you met them. So again, the real benefit of living in Mount Lebanon is we're coterminous, and we are one district with the municipality, so we are pretty close with the infrastructure for the municipality, and they're very close with us. The last item I want to talk a little bit about is cybersecurity. You may not think it's important, but it is an important issue for us. There have been stories of school districts having their information hacked or being held hostage. Last year, we put a significant amount of money into having a cybersecurity audit, and then ultimately did a lot of things to help make sure that our technology was safe and that we couldn't be hacked. So that's an ongoing issue for us. So we did things like changing credentials, making passwords more strict for our employees, upgrading our code set. So a lot of important things occurred to make sure that our information was safe inside the district. And a favorite topic of ours, we couldn't have an evening go by without talking about the impact of social media. And it can be very positive, but it can also be very negative. And one of the challenges that we have with our students is that we don't want to dissuade them from using social media, because we all use some form of social media from time to time. But it also can be used in a negative manner. And we deal with a lot of things that occur outside of school or in the cyberspace and on social media that then fall into the school. So we often are dealing with that. So many parents have been to training about how to help your child navigate through social media, but I can't tell you how important that is as a parent to make sure that you are monitoring your children's use of social media to make sure that they're using it wisely and appropriately. Anything else you want to say about, I asked Chief Aloth if his daughter had it, and he said not yet. They check their phone. There's all these things that we can do to help make sure our kids are safe in social media.
I approach it from a little bit different perspective, from law enforcement than Dr. Steinhauer does from education. But not a day goes by that we don't deal with something at the police department that has some connection to social media. And it is not good. I understand the benefits of it. I understand getting information out. The day that I retire from being a police officer and no longer have to help monitor the police department social media account, I will be done with social media. I just, I've seen a lot of bad things related to it. I've seen how it's affected children. I've seen the long-term effects of something that's seemingly innocent as a younger child just starting to get involved in social media. I've seen the unfortunate incidents where that's affected them long-term, because one of the things we talk about with the kids in middle school through our community outreach officers is once it's out there on the internet or social media, it's very, very difficult to pull back. And we've had situations, unfortunately, right here in Mount Lebanon where something seemingly innocent sent as a text message or Snapchat in sixth grade has come back to haunt someone when they're trying to get a job when they graduate from college. You know, so it's something that I see it just about every day, some of the bad consequences of social media. And, you know, I like I said, I have a very different view on it. I really think that you have to, if your kids are involved in it, if you're involved in it, you really got to pay attention. You really got to pay attention, especially to what your kids are doing. You know, I know that your kids won't think it's cool if you're checking out what they're doing on their phone, but if you're not paying attention to that, I think it can set you up for failure, set you up for a lot of problems. So be aware, if you pay the phone bill, it's your phone, right? You have the right to do that. They have the right to do whatever they want to do once they get out and start paying that bill themselves. You know, are no longer living under your roof. But the detrimental effects of something on social media, like I said, unfortunately I've seen them, and I think it's just one of those things where it can have positives, but it has a lot of negatives associated with it, especially if it's not monitored for kids.
In the school setting, it certainly can act as a contagion, and rumors, just like the old time when people would pass notes or say to the next person next to them, like, it can act as a contagion, and it can spread like wildfire, and we have very little ability to limit the impact of that contagion as it goes out. And quite frankly, we have very little impact that we can, we have very little reach that we can take into what occurs outside of school on social media. There was a case recently that came out of the Supreme Court, I think, about a cheerleader who didn't make some team, and she got on Snapchat, some social media, and said a lot of things about the school district and about the cheerleading squad and things like that. And the school district tried to suspend her and ultimately went to the Supreme Court. And what the Supreme Court said is basically school districts have a limited reach into what we can go into outside of the school day. So if they're on Snapchat or Instagram outside of the school day, we have very little ability to discipline for that. We can certainly talk to kids about it, but we have very little ability to discipline kids for that.